Welcome to Real Bass Lessons. My good friend Rob Gourlay is here again today, and we're going to do a little more of what we did before. We called it an interview. And Rob had asked me a bunch of questions about in the past about my teaching, about my books and stuff. And today we thought we'd talk about basses. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Rob and I have both been playing bass forever, been playing lots of basses. We own a number of instruments by a lot of different manufacturers. But what we're going to do today is simply zero in on what I do. Basses that I've purchased, basses that I play, basses that I built, and sort of what I learned and what I know about basses. Now I want you to understand, this is not a bass shootout, which one's the best or the cheapest or the whatever. No, it's just talking about information that I feel like might be a benefit to people. Got that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, talk to them then if you want.
Well, there's so many basses that you play in the real bass lessons, and you're always getting questions about them. And I've seen kind of the collection grow over time,
Sure.
and it's just a real interesting topic. Most people don't get a chance to play all these different instruments, and if they do, it's maybe just in a music store or something. So there's a lot of information that I know that you've learned by having these over the years. And I thought that would be fun to share.
Sounds great.
So first off, something we talked about in the interview before, but where you started with instruments in your dad's store.
Oh yeah.
Was that your first experience with like Fender basses, or
Sure.
in that?
That would have been the mid 1960s, and those were the high quality instruments. Mm-hmm. My father, at one point when I was 12 years old, when I was 13 years old, he opened up a small music store. And in those days, the music stores held what today we would call the classic instruments. He had Gibson, Fender, Gretsch, and a few other things, but those are the main ones. So yeah, I started playing his before I ever owned my own. His original, what was it, a 60 P bass, and then he had a 64 Jazz. And yeah, I started out playing the stuff. His guitar, my first guitar I played on was a little bit on his Telecaster, and then also his Gretsch, Green Country Gentleman. That's why I'm learning a chord. But my first instruments were the classic, they've become the classic instruments, sure.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think that that's what you had. The first bass you had is the bass that's the greatest
of course,
instruments ever made.
The first C chord I ever learned was on my dad's Green Gretsch Country Gentleman, And I learned Secret Agent Man on his, I think it was his Telecaster. No, it was an SG. That's right, his little SG.
Yeah, wow. So when did you get your first bass that you played? Was it from that, or did you?
No, a little bit later on, I'd say about it. Well, I played guitar for a couple of years, so I had a guitar almost immediately. About 3 weeks after, learning a few chords, I told him I really wanted to learn to play for good, and he said, "You serious?" I said, "Yeah." So he bought me a Gibson 335, ES 335. That would have been in 1967 one, I believe. But my first bass that was mine. So anyway, so I played guitar a whole bunch, and I just sort of dabbled on bass. But then I really wanted to play bass a bunch, so he ordered me, and I had a EBO.
Oh, okay.
About a 68 model, I think. 60.
Great big pickup on it?
Oh yeah, of course, a big humbucker. It was the SG, but in a bass form.
Did the neck go down like this when you weren't hanging on to it?
Not really. It was a fairly smallish bass and fairly light, and it came even with the black labella strings, which weren't around for many years, but now they're popular again. You bet. No, I loved it, man. I played like crazy on it. I pretended I was Grand Funk Railroad on that shit, man.
That's awesome. So when did you get? There was a jazz bass. I remember seeing pictures of you playing with John LaPorta that you had. Was that one that you had all along, or was that no?
I sold all of my instruments, which was a lot of them. Meaning, I would buy them and play them for 6 months or a year and sell them. I remember going through all the classic, the Gibson, the Ripper, the Grabber. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites is I had a Framus for quite a while. I loved that. I had the EBO. I had an EB3. And I had a few Fenders. Actually, the Fenders I played were my dad's. But the first Fender, let me back up. So then I didn't play Fenders or Gibson for a while. So what it was is I bought an Epiphone, a 1964 Epiphone Embassy Deluxe from a neighbor, believe it or not, for $50.
It's the one you still have with the Ludwig sticker on it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. That's the one that was my professional gigging instrument for right at 20 years. And I'm talking about 350 gigs a year. So I didn't own a Fender until that one you saw with John LaPorta. And I remember specifically, Mark Minkler, a friend of mine, in 1978. Went into a little pawn shop. We saw it in the store, driving by. Went in there, and it was a 64 jazz bass, and we paid $200 cash. I remember because neither one of us had a credit card. We went to the bank and got out two $100 bills, went back to the guy and bought the bass. It was like, yeah, baby. Now, of course, again, that was 1978. That was before they were, quote, vintage and worth anything. So the first thing we did was I took it home and we scratched the finish off. We sanded the finish off. You know, damn. You know, shot about 6 or 8 or 10 grand right there, right?
Yeah, sanding it, the dollars off as you went.
Exactly. Most people don't know it or they wonder why, but in that 80s, basically, late 70s, 80s, it became real popular to take the finish off the bass. There were hardly any instruments made of natural wood. They were all colored. So it was cool to take your old Fender or Gibson or whatever you had and scratch the finish off. So I did. And of course we ripped the original pickups and everything out of it, put DiMarzio in it and all sorts of hot stuff in it. And I didn't play it that much because I was still playing my Epiphone. And I was playing double bass like every day and every night. But that was that Fender there.
That was that Fender,
and I ended up selling that back to Mark Minkler, I don't know, 10 years later. I sold to him something like $600, and he was already, he's like, yeah, I know it's a lot more than you pay, but it's
nice
worth
profit.
Yeah,
you know?
still. And today, though, we still got the bass, and even without the bass, it's got to be worth, I don't know what, 6-8 grand, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was that one. That was that bass there, 64.
Wow. It's interesting because that one, I mean, I saw that picture that you
Sure.
have where you're playing with John Laporta with that one. That was the only Fender that I had seen at the time because
Correct.
you've had lots of different instruments over the years,
Yeah.
and things have kind of come full circle back
Correct.
to these Fenders. So when did you get back playing them? What inspired that?
I think what inspired it was, excuse me, was, maybe 15 years ago now. That's about right. Yeah, 15 years ago now. I just decided I wanted to collect a few instruments. You know, the classic Fenders, P basses of our day, right? And I bought a couple from a guy that I trusted. It's hard to buy those if you don't get to play them and see them because you know what you get. But I bought them from a person I trusted, so I knew they were authentic, had the real stuff. They weren't, didn't change out all the parts. And again, that would have been, whatever year that would have been, 2005, something like that maybe? Is that right? I forget where we're at now, 2000, but anyway, about 15, maybe 20 years ago. And that sort of started it. I bought a couple, and boy, I fell in love with them and I started collecting. As a matter of fact, right here, this one, I think was the second one I purchased. I'm trying to think now what they were. Oh, yeah, this was the very second one. This is an original 1966. Interesting enough, it doesn't have the little round on it, which most 66 do, but this is a 66, and it's been refinished. It was refinished exactly at the time, probably 15, 18 years ago. But other than that, it's identical and 100%, original shapes. Got the original painted headstock with the logo on it, original pickups and everything, and it just sounded and played wonderful. The little binding, of course, and the blocks, the dots. If you're a collector, all of those specific little aspects of the instrument, they determine its value. But I've never been a collector for I wanted to hang it on the wall and check its value. I wanted to play it. I wanted to feel good. So this is the second one I ever bought.
Now, was this jazz? Did it play similar to the one you had?
Of
before?
course, yeah.
Same kind of neck and that.
It's exactly the good right neck. Interesting enough, you can see this here. At one time, it came apart and they glued it back together. See that there? Yeah. But no, it plays. I mean, it's real. By the way, we're not going to demo any of these basses sound-wise. You can go on the Real Bass Lesson site and find a demo of every single bass that I have.
Probably a couple of them.
More than once, yeah. But at least just go into the little playlist called Demos and you'll see them all there. I play them all the time on there. But yeah, it plays like the real thing. Sounds exactly like it. I can remember the sound. I can remember the feel, and I like them that sound right.
So can you tell them just acoustically when you play it? Do you know immediately like this is a good one?
That's one of the things that I like. Listen to this. Now I know that just through the little microphone here it kind of sounds kind of tinny, but I like an instrument that vibrates.
Yeah, it
And
speaks.
Yes, it speaks. Yeah, you can just say that, hey, there's a lot of sound to it. Well, you can play an instrument that doesn't have a lot of acoustic sound, that still sounds great through the speaker box, but I like this instrument itself to vibrate. And I always can feel like, this has got a good feel to it. And I don't just mean how it's sort of under the fingers, but it's got a good vibration. It has the original bridge, which I like these bridges. Today, that's sort of a poo-poo thing. People will go, man, I want a high-mass bridge. Well, I like the original feeling low-mass bridges. I feel like there's a lot of vibration into the bass. Some people say, well, that loses the sound, transmits, doesn't get the sound to the body. Well, whatever. It's the way I like the feel and the sound of it. And this thing feels great. Here, you played a couple of notes on it, Rob. I love how you play it.
So
Doesn't it feel good, too?
It does. The weight, now, I don't know how much this one weighs, but
I
it just
do
feels
exactly.
right, though. Oh, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah, you can hear it,
those
feel
open
it.
strings,
Yeah, and it just vibrates. You can feel the wood. I like that feeling. That's part of the timbre and the sound, in my opinion.
Yeah. Plus, it feels like all the notes speak on it.
Oh,
like
that's something that's important to me. Is not every bass that's old is good just because it's old. There were some bad ones, and of course, some of them have deteriorated over the years. I want an instrument to speak. If you're a bona fide collector, you don't ever fix anything on a vintage bass. Well, I fix things so they speak well. This one actually has not been refretted, but I've had some of them where it didn't speak well, and I had frets done and fret work done and stuff. It's because I want them to be players' basses.
Yeah.
This one just plays and speaks very well. And again, that's something that's hard if you don't know a lot about basses. To purchase one online, you don't know what it's going to feel like. You have to have the advice and someone who you trust who can play it and say, no, it speaks well all over the instrument. The weight of your vintage basses, and again, there's lots of variations, but of your real instruments, the real vintage ones, the 60s, roughly the J basses were 9 pounds, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, all the way up to 9.4, and the P basses are all that 8.2, 8.3, 8.4. So basically it's a pound more. But still, they're very light in compared to what came after in the 70s and 80s and the Fenders in the 90s. Now today, of course, there's lots of makers who copy the Fenders who aren't real Fenders, and they make them all different weights. I have done that myself, of course.
Now, was the wood that they used in all of them? Was it the same kind of wood? Or?
In general, they used for the J basses particularly. They used I forgot alder.
Alder.
Yeah, and I was talking, as a matter of fact, with a student about this yesterday. It's a combination. It's not just that, so they used light wood. Well, maybe the wood they used was lighter, but also understand, this wood has been aged for 60, 70 years now. Don't you that you can buy a contemporary body or bass, and you can say, I want it one that's been roasted. And they actually roast the wood to dry it out and make it lighter. Yeah, but no, so basically those are alder. They made some different ones at different times with swamp ash, with ash, but mostly they're alder.
This bass, you just pick it up and you're like, this is great.
Yes,
it just feels nice. It just feels like it's all the right weight. Everything.
It is. It's the classic.
Yeah.
When they first started making J's, they made them all the same for a long time. P basses went through a big transition. They started out as the Telecaster basses, and all that kind of stuff, and then they got into the late 50s, really, that 57 or 58, 960 when they got into a standard sort of feel and sound. Yeah, but this is just a classic one.
Yeah. Now, what is this neck? What is this?
Ooh, with the sizing.
How do you differentiate between the necks, or are they the same?
They have a little stamp on them, and they say, I forget, is it A, B, or C, something like that, and it's a C neck, an A neck, or a B neck. But again, with the jazz basses, they made them specifically to be a certain size, different than the P bass, which I understand the P bass was made large at first to imitate the double bass. They saw the precision bass as something that the double bass player could play without having to carry the sucker around, but more than that, precision intonation with the frets. Well, they made this for the guitar player who wanted to play the bass. So they made it simply smaller, lighter, smaller string spacing. And this is a classic size. I forget, I can look it up, I've got all the sizes in here. But sure, this is just the exact size and feel. Now, over the years, they got to where they made them even much, much smaller than that. And today, there's a whole bunch of delineations. You can, they say, 90s C neck, or a new P, an American J neck of this and that. And I have a hard time keeping track of all of them. But this is just a classic vintage feeling.
Yeah, it's a great bass.
It's identical to the one that I played in the video earlier. This one is a 65 as opposed to 66, but it's exactly the same thing. Everything about it, I mean, you just almost can't tell the difference in the neck and the feel. Here, put this in your hands. It's got the same feel, it's live, it's quick. I had this one refinished, of course, too. And actually, I actually had this one not refretted, excuse me, I had a fret job done on this because it's just, it was just so buzzy and rattly all up and down in here. It was that kind of thing that you could play this note, and if you played all these frets, if you played all these frets, it was still that note. It was still that pitch.
It's maybe not what you want. Yeah.
Well, I've often joked, which almost isn't a joke. You don't buy a true vintage J bass to play above the 12th fret. Because of the age, they're inconsistent, and the neck's moved and stuff. But lots of them are good, and it doesn't take much work. Now, of course, again, I decreased the value as far as collector's concerned by having the fret job, but who cares? It plays and sounds tremendous.
Well, because like you said, these are not sitting in a
No.
display case. These are instruments that you
players.
play.
I love these basses for playing. I've sold a few of my vintage collection, and it's always to players who are just blown away how great they play. And I have to warn them. I say, that's true, this one does, but remember, again, just because they're old doesn't mean they're good, you know?
Yeah.
That one just feels great, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
It's always fun to look, Rob, on the back of the neck, and looking on the back of that one, and you can see the wear pattern where the player has played the most. Look. There's a big wear pattern there. I have one P bass that's funny. It's got a great big wear pattern right there, and another one. And a student of mine, Tom's, going, I don't understand that. Of course a guy played it, but how come there? I said, well, he was probably a country player or something, and he played in C and D a lot, and he played right here.
Oh, yeah.
And he learned how to go. But he didn't play. There's no man's land in there.
All the money notes.
That's
All the
it.
money notes,
Yeah, well, money notes, and of course he played him here. He played this octave up here. His arm got tired, is what it was. Whew. Oh, that's easy. Thank you. Yeah. This one you can just see a bunch of dents, but that one there's definitely got wear patterns where it was at.
Yeah. But it has the same thing where the notes speak on
Oh.
it, and that's probably something that if that doesn't happen, it's not a bass that you're going to want.
It's not a bass that I want. I've only ever purchased maybe one only that didn't speak the way I wanted, and I just simply sold it at a lower price. That wasn't it. Now, I'm very careful with the vintage instruments to buy them from people that I know, and or I can go play them before I do,
Yeah.
so that I know what I'm getting.
Oh, these are great. Let's take a look at a P bass.
Oh, you
from
bet.
back in the
Here we go.
day.
I'll put this up here. I have all sorts of, vintage ones. This is not one of the oldest ones, but this is a great one. This is a 69. Here, you hold it. I like it when you hold it. I can talk about it that way. This is a classic one. And understand, that was the time period, that 69, really 67, 8, and 9, when they were changing to the CBS ones. This one's pre-CBS. Now, the only thing that is unique about this, and what do I mean by that, for those of you who don't know, and that is, they made lots of parts. They might make bodies, well, they might make 1,000 of them. Well, if they only sold 600 of them one year, they didn't throw them away, they just used them the next year. That's why sometimes you get an instrument, and there'll be a different date on the neck, as opposed to the body. Because they just grabbed it out of the bin and was like, oh, these are the ones we made this year, these are the ones we made last year. Well, these parts, this feels exactly like a 1960, 62, 64, 65, except it's a 69. Now, the only thing that is different, and that is up and about, I think maybe 68-ish or something, again, I forget, 60, 70, they started to make the fingerboard just a little bit thinner this way. And again, I forget if that's a C neck or a B neck or what it is, but this is not your classic real wide of the 60 or 61 or 62.
Now, do you prefer this kind of a neck, or do you like them all?
They just all feel different to me. I just love them all.
These work so well with the strings on them.
Oh, I love those. Those are the, I just forgot, Labella. Labella tape wound, and I like the big ones. They're like 62 I think it is, or something like that. This up here, 65 maybe, even 62 through like 125, something like that. Fairly fat ones. I like these a lot. I use them on both bases, J and P, the vintage, but mostly on the P bass. I just like that warmth. Again, you can go hear these all demoed on my website, and they sound killer. I've recorded with this one specifically for some reason. I don't know why. I recorded a bunch with this. I went and played a couple of festivals with this a few years ago, and I don't know. I guess it was just sitting around. It was easy to grab, like the color of it.
Yeah, this one's great.
You bet.
Now, how about as far as pickups and that? Do you notice any difference between different years of the pickups, or are they?
Yes and no, meaning obviously the single pickup in the old Ps were quite different from the split pickup. But once they made this, other than the reissues these days, and they wind those specifically to try to get a certain sound, they were all pretty much built the same. Now again, I know there were earlier ones, when they first made a split, they did some weird stuff and they made the poles higher on, they actually made the poles higher onto the A. It's like, how bizarre.
Right.
Somebody told them, somebody decided the A wasn't strong enough. But anyway, in general, no, they're just all the same. Now, when you buy a vintage bass though, they're never the same. Understand, there's been electricity going through this little bitty thin wire in there for 60, 70 years. Well, that changes the whole amperage, the ohms and stuff in it, and it just makes the sound different. The magnetism wears out, and that makes the sound different.
Yeah.
So every vintage bass, it has a very unique characteristic. Well, it's like buying a car from 1962.
Yeah.
They're not the same anymore. They're different.
Yeah. They've done some living.
Yes, they have. So that's that's the cool part about some vintage basses. You get one, you go, oh my God, this feels like nothing I've ever had. Yeah, because it is. It's got its own personality, its own bumps and bruises, and its character to it.
So is there anything different in terms of how you look for a jazz bass, for what characteristics of that? The same
thing. I like it traditional feeling. I like the weight of the traditional. But again, the main thing is, does it speak?
Yeah.
Most of them, because of the lightweight and the way they're built, the size, they speak very well. Some better than others, but most of them speak very, very well. The old ones obviously had the reverse tuners. You bet. My favorites, people have said, Jim, you got to tell me which one's your favorites. Yeah, well, all of them. But really, I've been able to tell now, I like the 60 and 61 P bass is the best.
What's different about those?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the neck. I really don't think it is, but I think there's just a little bit in the pickups that are a little different. You can't go back, or maybe some people can. I've never been able to go back and go, look online and tell me what's different in that 60. By the way, when you look online for about all the old vintage stuff, you realize 99.9% of it is somebody's opinion, someone's guess.
Yeah.
I guess if Leo Fender were alive, he could tell you. But then, just because he made it a certain way, does a bass that's 70 years old and this one's 70 years old, do they still sound the same? No, they sound different. So, I don't know, I've got a number of different ones, and my God, that 60 and that 61 just feels so nice and just dark and fat and warm. I don't have them sitting here, but you can go look at them on my website. They're all there.
So what do you when you get one of the newer basses that I know you have, you get some of these, like the custom shop ones in that. How do those compare to some of these?
That's a good question, Rob. Those are very interesting to me today, very desirable, and the reason is because I like the way they feel and the way they sound. This is a custom shop, and I have a number of these. No, interesting. There's a couple things that are exactly the same. Notice how so lightweight, and play it again. Yeah. Now it's not quite as noisy as that one, but it does speak. Yeah. And see the lid's a little more width here? This is a 61 supposedly. By the way, in the custom shop ones, I can't find any difference between 60 and 61. Except in the ones they built this year in 2020, the pickups are a touch different. I guarantee it. But what I look for, excuse me, I like specifically the specs they used. They came out with it in a little bit in 2018, but all of their 2019 and 2020 heavy relic P's and J's, they used, in 2019, they used the same specs. Now, of course, the sizes are different for Fender and P bass, but I like that. And that is, they put a 9.5 inch radius on the neck. It's a little bit flatter than the original, which is 7.25. So it's just a little bit flatter neck. The frets are medium jumbo sized, as opposed to on the older basses, not that one, but on the older P's and stuff, they're the really thin, narrow ones. I like the medium jumbo ones a little better. And there's a scoop. They call it the scoop in here and the amount of scoop there, and just the connection of the body and the weight. There's a real specific feeling. And I love the pickups they used in 2019. The ones that I bought a bunch of are the 2019, what do they call them? Time Machine Heavy Relic. And I have one 2018 that was made the same way, and then I have a couple of 2019s that are the same way. In 2019s, I used some different specs, but they also offered that spec. And boy, I just love the way it plays, feels, the way it sounds. Some people don't like the heavy relic. Too bad. Man, the bass plays killer.
Yeah.
You know, so I saw one guy the other day that said something so cool. He said, he said, I used to hate that. He said, I thought, how stupid, man, to pay such a good price for a bass that's already been beat up. He said, until I went and played one.
Yeah.
He said it felt so darn
that.
cool.
Yeah.
It just felt so cool and sounded so cool. He said, all of a sudden I started liking it. You know what? I felt somewhat the same way. I never disliked him, but I thought this. I thought, I've had basses all my life and I've never beat him up that much. Well, so what?
Yeah.
I answered it another way, which is really more realistic. The guy said to me once, Jim, I know you like those, but man, I'd rather buy mine and, just play it on 1,000 gigs and beat it up myself. And I said, man, I don't have that much time left.
Yeah. But that's the thing that when I, play this, it just feels great. And part of that is what they do on the neck,
Yes.
not just the stuff, but the bass just feels great. So.
And they made the weights real nice. The weights on all of these, the Fender P basses of this era, these custom shop ones, they're all like that 8.2 ounce, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5. They just feel great. And they just sound live. And one of the things that's very unique about them, unlike the old ones, and that is up here, they speak so much better than traditional Ps. Like this is supposedly a copy of the 61. 61P don't speak like that up here. You know what one student said? One guy said, this sounds like a P bass down here and a J bass up here. I said, yeah, almost, doesn't it? How interesting,
Yeah, that's good because there always were those notes on them that you're like, yeah, I can't play that one.
No,
Okay.
right. And these bass, oh man. Yeah. The custom shop stuff, I can't say enough about it. And I don't mean general all of them, but I know that in the last couple of years, these heavy relic ones, of these specific eras that I purchased, these 6061s, the workmanship is first class. There's not a dead note on the instrument. They speak so well. They feel and respond so well. Just absolutely love them. I have a fleet of these. You can see them all online where I've made videos of them and played them and stuff. They're just great instruments.